Hi all, my name is Gijs. I'm the founder of OpenUp and welcome to OpenUp at the Workplace. Today we have a very special guest. It's a guest I already know quite some time from university period, but also after that. Kayvan Kian, welcome.
Thank you very much, Gijs.
Very good to have you here. We met again at a workshop in McKinsey for young leaders, for young entrepreneurs. I was part of that group and it was very helpful to me. You were facilitating 2 days of workshops. Can you explain us a bit what you tend to do when you work with groups?
Very much. Glad to hear it was helpful. And if it was helpful, it's because probably you and many others brought in so much. For me, the idea behind the Young Leaders Forum is, can we create an environment without distractions? So as you noticed, only chairs, a room, no PowerPoint, no videos, no nothing. And can we help each other as a new generation to lead, grow, and thrive in complex times?
It was for me also, I think the way you do it also gives a special energy to the room, to the group. And I think that was also the energy that we needed as entrepreneurs, being kind of hurried all the time. I experienced some slowing down when I talked to you. So I'm looking forward to slowing down together.
Hopefully not too much.
No, not too much. Let's make it attractive as well. You have a very interesting background. You studied in Erasmus University. You were the founder of 2 startups yourself. You worked in McKinsey. You still work as an advisor for McKinsey. You did your MBA, but you're also in cybersecurity. So I'm always inspired because you do something special also in your career with finding what really suits you. Can you explain a bit, what is the red line, the theme of your career? How do you look at that?
It's sometimes easier looking back over the years, but I would say ever since high school afterwards, I was always very curious, like, how can smart, bright people with good intentions still make big mistakes, costly mistakes, harmful mistakes? And over the years, I got the chance to actually work with many smart, bright young leaders, and understanding that, okay, as much as you might understand specifics around the tools that you use, are you using them, for instance, in the right context? Are you using them at the right moment? And how do you apply these things in day to day? And I mainly followed that. And that brought me indeed as a consultant to a variety of companies, small, big, that brought me to indeed working on safety and security and cybersecurity around that. It brought me to writing books for leaders. It brought me to teaching. But it was mainly following that big idea that I find fascinating. How do you prevent big mistakes? And on top of that, of course, figure out what can actually work that is helpful for us as a society.
When did you find out that this is for you, this big question? It's such an appealing question. It's an interesting question. It's a more than ever relevant question with all the things happening in the world. All those smart leaders, also political leaders, creating very difficult situations for people. So how did you find out that this was your question?
In school, I found it very interesting. Reading history, after a while, I remember thinking, how can we actually prevent bad things from happening? Because we have so much information. When I studied economics, I felt that we knew a lot of the tools. We've studied all these different aspects, but still, apparently, there's something about not being able to apply them or apply them incorrectly. And it's easy to articulate it after the fact, but it's following that intuition. And maybe it's from a sense of care and growing up after seeing, in our early student years, the dot-com crisis bubble, the financial crisis less than a decade later, seeing the harm that can actually be done when big mistakes are being made, of course, makes this more personal.
You are nowadays also a father, established a family. So therefore, in its own smaller context, this is also relevant for you. Mm-hmm. How is it to combine several roles in life for you?
Exciting, humbling, and always learning. But I'm also happy to have had the privilege, in a way, to meet many other young parents who are also in similar situations. And I believe very much by exchanging tips, ideas, experiences, we can find unique solutions to our unique settings, be it a family, a company, your neighborhood, and the like.
I think the concept of learning is also very vital to us and our mental well-being in a way. That we constantly develop ourselves, and that we are open to new experience, reflect on these experiences, and bring it forward in lessons learned in these several roles that you have in everyday life. So that echoes with me as well. We are going to talk about the complexity of leadership, and also your vision and your view on that. Can you share a bit, maybe as a starting point, what is leadership? That's such a broad concept. We are all leaders in a way. That's how I look at life as well. We all need to lead our lives. How do you look at leadership?
It's a good, interesting question. Let's see how we can,
make it
different
angles maybe.
look at it in a conversation like this. Maybe one way to look at it is what distinguishes leaders that are more effective these days than others. And from my experience, it's those who are more aware of the book that I wrote, What is Water, of who they are, who are they leading, and also the environment, the water that they're leading in. And you could argue, indeed, as you say, those who are good at getting information and being aware of these three dimensions can lead others better. Now, this is quite straightforward if you're in a simple environment, for instance, but the more complex it becomes, the more is dependent on the wisdom of the person who's making the big decisions or empowering others to make that decision. So don't want to attempt to define leadership in a sentence, but we can definitely observe and look at it from many different angles here.
It's also a process in a way. It's maybe difficult to define it in one or two sentences, but leadership is also a process that you are part of as a human being. That idea of complexity, that idea of also knowing who you are, knowing who the people are around you, understanding your context. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? It intrigues me. I'm a psychologist by background. We all also had the Oracle of Delphi that says, know yourself. And of course, also by knowing yourself, you get more empathy in a way also for other people. That's how I experienced that. You also get to know other people better. It softens you in a way, knowing yourself. But how do you look at knowing yourself, knowing the others, being sensitive to the context? Maybe as a starting point for this conversation, elaborate a bit more on that and how you look at that. How do you know yourself? How do you get to know yourself?
When do you tick it off and say, okay, now I know myself?
For instance, it's different.
We could argue that maybe that never happens because in the meantime, you're also, as you say, developing, changing, and nothing is static. But we could aim for getting to know ourselves better than yesterday, than this morning, each other better than the last time we met, and also the environment. And you could say that if you're curious, you find ways to stay in touch with your environment and have that access to information. Better is already a very good thing to strive for. It's actually a bit dangerous, you could argue, to actually think you know it all. Because then, of course, you might completely make the wrong decision at the wrong time, not being even aware of it. So a big part of the focus of the books, the forums, the time together, it is very much on better. And what I hope is that readers, leaders, and everyone around get curious. Is there something exciting about it? Something fun? Uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity could sound a bit daunting. But there's actually a part that could be very intellectually stimulating. It builds self-confidence. And people might feel that it's not easy, but I can see myself doing it, doing a good enough job at it. Yeah.
And it's also a lifelong journey, the way you describe it. So it's pretty appealing. You always have, there's always something new to find out.
Yeah, and it could have been maybe in the past a luxury. Yeah. Some people like to learn, so enjoy. We have something for you. But you can argue that the more complex the environment becomes, the more it becomes a necessity. You cannot afford to walk around with an outdated map. Just like in your navigation, if you don't use any new updates, what's going to happen in finding your destination? So you are forced to either learn, whether you want it or not, but there are definitely ways to make it more enjoyable.
And why has the world become increasingly complex? How do you look at that? Why is this more relevant than ever, your message?
So one characteristic of complexity is that it is not enough to study the parts, but it's about understanding the relationship between the parts. A human body is very complex because we don't really always understand how all the parts relate to each other, even though, of course, you can study the individual parts themselves. But we would still not know what your personality is, so to speak. So the more parts you have and the more relationships they have, the more complex it becomes. And it's very simple, but if you're not aware of that, if you assume that you sort of know the parts and that's good enough, you might, again, be using the right tools, but in the wrong environment. So if you think about technology, if you think about relationships between companies, countries, the relationships between the public sector, the private sector, the social sector, because of all these things connecting more together, a lot of the world becomes, of course, more complex.
And these interdependencies that you were describing, they have increased significantly in the previous decades. I guess that's not even a linear development, that may be an exponential development that you're describing.
After a while, it is not even relevant. You can study it a lot. The conclusion remains the same, that many aspects are unknowable. Cause and effect is not very clear. And maybe a traditional way assumes that if I do A, I can expect B. And the more complex it is, well, maybe nothing happens. Maybe good things happen. Maybe bad things happen. In a way, there's only one way to find out. And that's not only in theory. So as your company grows in scale, as your company invites more people, sometimes I have a client and they have one new person joining, and automatically things become way more complex because this one person has all these new relationships with all these new people, brings their own dynamics, and something changes. It's not the same company anymore. It's not the same plus one. It's a new company, so to speak. I don't know about you growing OpenUp. You have more people than when we first met, maybe, but it's a different company, I can imagine.
For me, this is an inspiring idea because you always search for this causal relationships as leaders. So you search for, if we do A, then B will follow, and you find out it's not that easy. And I also kind of liked the earlier conversation that we had in which you talked about sensitivity, observation, also humbleness as a leader, to kind of get sensitive for that idea of maybe non-causal things happening in the company. And not everything that is linear. Have you seen leadership changed in the previous 20 years? So you were 20 years ago, early stage strategy consultant. Now you're an advisor to entrepreneurs, to companies. Have you seen leadership change? Can you say something about that? Do you think it has changed?
I think it has changed. Definitely many parts have changed. If I look back, even 10 years ago or before starting the Young Leaders Forum, the combination of words of young and leader were very rare. When I would bring it up, people would almost look a bit surprising. They were like, what do you mean, young leader? Nowadays, it seems like there are many people who talk about younger leaders. And when I started, the environment maybe felt more possible to do things top down. You had more experienced senior people who had more information, more experience, more knowledge, and they could make big decisions. And if you joined, it was mainly about executing what others have thought about. If you compare that to now, many organizations, individuals, intuitively, maybe not even by studying it a lot, understand that there's only so much senior people can know. And there's even so much everybody together can know. Many things are unknowable. So leadership becomes about much more maybe understanding which direction do we need to orient ourselves towards if we want to be successful as a company. But how we get there, what problems will we encounter on a day-to-day basis, what are the unique one-off solutions out there, that's maybe much more to young leaders, young project leaders and others to decide on a day-to-day basis. So it is maybe not necessarily a philosophy that's changing, it's practice that is pushing a more decentralized way of working. Yeah. But of course you can become too decentralized. So that's the interesting part about complexity, is that you will keep these tensions. Not having a good orientation and just leaving things to people to do whatever they think is right might not help you be successful. You might have too many ideas. Your attention might be spread too thin. So as a leader, being able to identify at least the tensions, okay, top down has its benefits, but we're going to pay a big price if we keep that. Bottom up has its benefits, but we'll have a price if we do that. Yeah. We cannot really solve this. Can we have the best of both maybe? Or are we going to say the next quarter, we're going to shift a bit more top down, and then the quarter afterwards, like skiing, shift a bit more bottom up? What is wisdom in that regard? And that's what makes complexity, of course, in a way also very interesting to work with.
As leaders, we feel that you are right, but we also feel at the same time, but how can I do that in everyday practice? Mm-hmm. To give an example, we have a management team meeting every week, which is a management team operations meeting. Mm-hmm. And all the things you put on the agenda should be able to have some sort of an actionable follow-up to it. Mm-hmm. So if you discuss something, there should be an action point that could come out of the discussion. Yeah. And then we do that very briefly, like a couple of minutes per topic, to keep the pace. The other example, of course, is Amazon, where they also say that the decision velocity is very important. So, make a lot of decisions, make it fast. And if you cannot turn it around, then think a bit deeper. But every decision that you can either, restore or change back, you're allowed to make it very fast to keep the decision velocity high. Yeah. If I listen to you, I would, I want to reflect. I want to go for a walk. I want to take some time. I want to maybe sometimes even zoom out a bit more and understand where we are in. Yeah. A bit of the what is water. I'm in that water. So what would be your practical advice how to deal with these tensions between centralized, not centralized, top down, bottom up, go all in, actionable, decision velocity, but maybe also reflect? Any suggestions how to do that well?
No, I can very much imagine those tensions being present on a day-to-day basis. And one thing I would be hesitant is to just copy what someone else has done. With different contexts, different complexity, different goals, different aims, and assume that would work here. That way of thinking can be helpful if you would say you're in a more complicated environment. Imagine that you want to become good at creating Rubik's Cubes. You can copy a lot of what others are doing, and you probably become better. It is straightforward. There's a logic to it. Their best practices, and you can learn from each other. When it comes to complexity, what works maybe at another company might backfire here because you have a different culture, different mission, different everything else over here. So one tip would be to be very clear on what's the real goal and what are means to get there. You mentioned decision velocity. Is that the goal in itself? Or is the real goal accessing information, and you do that through decisions, small decisions, you get feedback loops. Yeah. But if you make decisions, you get feedback, but you don't have the time to interpret that feedback, you are still not accomplishing your goal. So in this case, it would be maybe understanding what is it that we're trying to understand about this market, about this client, about this environment, about this product. What part of that can we understand through decisions? What part of that through information gathering, through other ways? And next week, we need to be able to tell ourselves we understand this product, this market, anything else better. But by only focusing on means and distinguishing things in a way that is not helpful.
I like it. No, you're kind of encouraging us as leaders to find our own journey. It's your own journey. It's the journey of the company. It's the journey of the colleagues. It's the journey of the leadership. To be sensitive, to practice, to have a good goal setting, of course, to know what you are heading for, what you want to achieve. But also to find that balance is a very individual journey, the way you describe it.
Individual, and making very tangible what is it that we are trying to do here. Yeah. And quick iterations, quick decisions, feedback loops are very helpful in very complex environments because you learn a lot. But if you don't take time to actually learn, what are the decisions for?
You are every year engaging with our new colleagues. Yes. And I also consider them leaders, leaders in OpenUp. And we use your framework, your book, What is Water. It teaches us how to strive in an uncertain world. Can you explain a bit what you wanted to achieve with your book that I think is very interesting to our listeners?
So I never thought of writing a book in the first place. But one thing I found out through working with all the young leaders all around the world was that I learned a lot. And one thing I was doing is also sharing lessons from people with each other. But I didn't want to, be the one personally who has to make sure these lessons are shared. And a book would be a very elegant, simple way to do that. So the book contains lessons that have been filtered through time, through practice, through leaders in different complex environments. And what remains is written. So it's hopefully more timeless principles and ideas that you can help make your own. And the invitation, of course, to the reader, to everyone else is see what works for you. Maybe there are things that are not in the book that are helpful that you've discovered over the years, and share that. So it's a way to encourage us helping each other.
And there are also some practical assignments in the book. We did it in the group that you were facilitating, that you are also facilitating in our company. Can you give 2 or 3 examples of great exercises that you find great exercises?
Exercises I use myself day to day. The idea behind it is to understand in an uncertain world what matters and what part of that you can control, what is up to you. So in the exercises, we talk about meaning. It's very demanding to work in an uncertain environment. But if you know why you're doing what you're doing, if it connects with an important reason for you specifically, it is much more likely that you'll be able to continue despite the ups and downs. Put in another way, without that sense of meaning, it's also very easy to give up, understandably. So a very practical exercise is understanding that which you're doing, what are you actually contributing to? And what of those are exciting to you? Is it societal? I can imagine many who work here have a societal goal, mission, how you want to look at it. But some actually find the company exciting. They love to build it. There's something fascinating about creating something out of nothing. For some, it is the clients, the people, the individuals that you're helping. So an exercise is understanding what are your sources of meaning, and can you connect what you're doing to that? But when it comes to leadership, also not assuming that which is meaningful for you is automatically meaningful for others. No. So are you able to understand why your team members show up every day? And maybe you can help them connect what they're doing with what is important to them in that regard. So there are many exercises. Once you go through them, they're quite straightforward, so easy to remember. But if you think about one thing no one can take away from you in uncertain times, whatever happens next year, are your unique strengths, your talents. And that's a comforting thought, comforting. It is interesting, but how well do you know what you're good at, what not? What gives you energy, what drains your energy? And how can you make the most out of that? How can you make the most out of that for your team? You might not have the luxury to just hire as many people as you want, but at least getting the best out of those people who you already are working with, that could be the main thing to focus on.
And one of the things that you made me realize is you can also have your strength that costs you energy.
Yes.
That was never, no one explained that
Nobody
one to me.
talks
No. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's like could be a muscle that has been overused. So one thing that was exciting maybe 5 years ago, by now is costing energy. You might actually find boring, uninteresting. The point is not to say don't use that anymore, but how aware are you of yourself? Which skills, which activities lift you up, give you energy, and which deplete you? And is there a way to be a bit more thoughtful about what it is that you do? The risk is that your environment does not know that of you and see qualities, Gijs, that you're fantastic in, better than others. And before you know it, more and more part of your day-to-day work will be composed out of the things that actually cost you energy. And everybody's happy, people applaud you. But how does that make you feel at the end of the day, week, month? And how long can you keep that up? So it's these small nuances. Once you notice them, everybody's bright, smart, creative enough to say, what do I want to do with it? But if nobody's ever asked you these questions, if you don't have the time to reflect on them, good luck. It might be that you'll find out, but when it's too late.
I have some work to do here, to be honest. Also because I do feel that the difference between us and a lot of other startups lays also in the fact that we are pretty disciplined in the execution. Yep. So we all know what to do and how to drive it forward. We know where we should bring it.
High decision velocity.
Yeah, and knowing what is expected of me in this role, what kind of output, and we execute on that. But of course, in the execution, you need to be mindful whether it really fits you or not. So how I look at my role, it also has a lot of parts that I need to do for the company, but that are not necessarily always nice or energetic to do. And finding that balance, I find that difficult in this kind of role. I do realize I can improve that balance, and I should observe that balance better. But therefore, that message of you kind of resonated with me in the workshop very much.
And that tension, that balance will always be there. Yeah. And maybe the solution is, if you think about who you're hiring, be more mindful of what gives them energy, what not. Can you complement each other in your team in that regard? The goal is clear, the orientation. But how to get there, maybe there's a bit more flexibility in the execution.
Well, what I like, you talk about young leaders. And you were also talking about the senior executives when you started in McKinsey that may had more of a top-down approach to leadership. Let's not, generalize, but that may be kind of a more accepted style of leadership in those days. What comes to my mind is that I think a lot of these senior executives are also young leaders in a way. It would be interesting if they could regard themselves to be a young leader as well. I'm saying this because I have some work to do as well. In C-level recruitment, for instance, you often don't ask the questions that you now put on the table. And I think in a lot of boardrooms, these questions may not be asked to each other. Yeah. We go on an offsite sometimes, but if you're not aware, you end up in discussing strategy, but not necessarily those personal motivations, dynamics, psychology, etc. How do you look at that? Is it really for young leaders, or is this, what I mean? Or is it for everyone? Is this...
There have been quite some forums or places where people are actually quite senior and asked, "Is it okay if I come and
that's
sit in
fine.
the back?"
Yeah. And listen if it's
Listen.
relevant for me.
Listen and
Yeah.
observe. So
Yeah.
the definition is not very strict. It's
Yeah.
being young at heart,
Yeah.
and maybe there's a youthfulness, a curiosity, and everything around that. The point here is again, to what extent are the things that you mention a luxury?
Yeah.
Because you could decide we don't have time for that, or that's maybe something for outside of work. And to what extent is it a necessity? How confident are you that if you determine somehow the right strategy, you'll be able to execute it, you get to good places, and you do that again, and you don't have to think about these things. Now, the more complex the environment is, the more uncertainty there is, the more challenging it becomes, the more you feel that you don't have enough people to actually do what you want to do, the more pressure. All of these things become, of course, automatically more relevant. So if you think about fields like philosophy, if you fields like psychology, are typically topics when people only want to consider when they really need it. There's something there's a big problem here. But ideally, of course, you've already thought about it before those problems have come up. And maybe that's also a big part of what you're doing for other companies, I can imagine.
I feel that human connection in our company is very important, and it's also very vital to me. So I think I also like harmony in a way, and I'm not saying that there cannot be any tension, but I would like always to check in with people. If something happened, or know how they're doing. Are we aligned? Do we understand each other? With online meetings, I find it sometimes more difficult than with offline meetings. But I do think that that's kind of in the core of our company. That's what I hope for, that others would also say about OpenUp, that human dimension is very important as well. And of course, I would like to connect that to business goals, revenues, impact, all these things that matter to business. That would be my ideal to build. But it's easier to neglect these psychological elements than the strategic elements. So you need to remind yourself of the importance of that. And keep on reminding yourself of the importance of that.
It's not in our natural maybe ways of working, vocabulary, doing things. And maybe that's because there was a time where it was slightly less, at least relevant or important. You could still get very far without. But in a way, you've grown a company. It sounds like maybe you still feel responsible for that harmony and those aspects of the culture that you cherish. As you grow, it's more complex. There's only so much one individual can do. So maybe the idea here would be more to figure out how to embed that with others throughout the company. But as with many things, analogy with physical health, analogy with other aspects is you can focus on what you want, like strategy, execution, short-term delivery. Everything comes at, of course, a price. So sooner or later, you'll find out that maybe you should have focused on the interpersonal aspects, on the harmony, on the culture, and the values and the things that you want. But it's easy, of course, to not do that today. It's easy to do that, not do that tomorrow. But if you're in it for the long run, you need to balance the short-term results and the long-term culture and how to marry those two. It's a fascinating topic. I'd love to hear.
It is. Have you seen great examples of that? Have you seen examples where you thought, "Wow, this feels right"? Here that long-term emotion with people, alignment, values, mission-driven, and also these short-term goals, company goals, are aligned. Have you seen such examples?
What I've seen, which is also very noticeable, is that this language is coming up. Some people talk about short-term games and long-term games. And winning a series of short-term games doesn't automatically add up to winning a long-term game. And for me, that hints towards that there's people who sense this aspect of it. But of course, only focusing on the long run, you might miss out what you need to survive as a company for the next 3 months. And examples that I've seen nicely is individuals, leaders, groups who are able to talk about this as a collective, who come together and say, there seems to be a lot of debate internally, short term, long term, or focusing on our core business while maybe investing on new technologies. Let's understand where everybody stands today. Why do you want to focus more on the core? Why do you want to focus more on new technologies? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? And create a picture of where everybody stands today and together decide what is a wise thing for the next few weeks or months. So it's not that these examples that you ask about have solved this, but it's an integral part of what they do. And 3 months later, they try to shift the balance a bit better together. And you can imagine how you keep people on board. You are able to course correct. You don't come across as simplistic. You keep your credibility. So that's definitely what I've seen individuals and groups do.
I like it. So the idea that pops up is we have the OKR framework, which was I think originally used by Google to set company quarterly goals and also translate those to the teams and even to the individuals. You could do that. And we reflect on those. We reflect if we meet them. We also reflect if we didn't meet our targets. But it would be interesting to also reflect on the psychology of the quarter. What was the common psychology? How did we feel? How did we drive? How was the atmosphere in the office? I think we have some work to do there. That's kind of...
As you can call it psychology, it's also a bit more practical than that. Is what was this quarter about? If you think about the tensions that will be pushing the company in different directions. Yeah. So maybe this quarter was about new technologies at the cost of maybe what the core was. And we're fine with that. That gives much more direction and much more help in addition to indeed the OKRs and everything else.
Would you consider becoming part of a management team yourself? I'm not recruiting you here. But I'm saying that because you are very much advising the ecosystem. You're advising leaders, entrepreneurs, C-level leaders. Of course, that's different than also driving a company yourself. Have you thought about, also for you maybe in that dance of life, to kind of switch between, and I know you had your startups, but that's already quite a time ago. Have you considered switching, dancing between being, the advisor, opening up the eyes of others, and also doing it yourself in a way? If you understand the question, you're doing it yourself. Don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean. It could be so interesting.
Very much.
Yeah.
And I don't exclude that possibility. That might be a natural continuation of the things that I do. I find that for me, it's most important to believe that what I'm doing matters at that particular time. So it wouldn't be joining for the sake of joining. No. But if I feel that this is the best thing I can do today, then definitely it's part of what could be possible. Yeah.
Cool. For the listeners, there are some great takeaways in the books that you wrote. You had your own development in life, in career. Are there any takeaways for us? It's always difficult to give one or two lessons, but it could be helpful to think about what could be a takeaway for people if they listen to this conversation.
I hope it sparks at least some curiosity. It would be too simplistic to give a simple takeaway on this is what you should do in complexity. That means that none of us got it.
No, true.
But it's it's a fascinating field, and curiosity, confidence. If you feel you don't know everything, it's because things are unknowable to an extent. If you feel that tools that you've maybe learned growing up are not applicable, well, it's a humbling experience. but curiosity in what works in reality. But that also means that you need to know what reality is. So how could you be curious to your unique ecosystem, your water? How could you be curious to the people you work with? How could you be curious about yourself? So without that curiosity, I can imagine it becomes very dry to think a lot about these things. But with a little bit of curiosity and experimentation and fun and actually successes that you might experience, I hope you can pass that on again to others as a listener, as a reader, anyone else.
How do you cultivate that curiosity? How do you look at that? How do you? It's in ourselves, of course. You know, it's already there when you are a very small child, but it should also be cultivated in a way. It needs its water as well. How do you look at cultivating curiosity? What could be a first step?
Maybe connecting it to what we discussed a bit earlier is to understand what would give you meaning. Why would you want to even be curious in the first place? Maybe it's because you care a lot about the company you've built, and you realize that without that curiosity, it's difficult to foresee how that will go. So figure out for yourself what would make it worthwhile to be curious, experiment, make it playful. And if that is not for you, well, surround yourself with people who might have that, who get energy from that.
I like it. No, so indeed, it's about the why, understanding why you would want to be curious. You know, what's motivating you, what gives you that energy, that gasoline to be curious. Also surround yourself with people that are curious. That will work in any scenario, I would say. I also think it's kind of a social process. So, of course, it starts with you as well. But you need your environment for this as well. Yeah. Learning is also a very social experience. Interesting. I'm happy to be here on this table with you.
Likewise.
It's feeding my curiosity as well. Anything that we forgot to talk about?
So much to talk about in complexity, but we can definitely continue our conversation.
Yes, let's do that. I thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.